it's an honour to speak on this, the Power of Attorney Bill, brought forward and championed so ably by my honourable friend, the member of South Basildon and East Thurrock. And it's always a pleasure to follow my colleague, my honourable friend for South West Hertfordshire, who spoke very diligently on this bill. I'm incredibly glad to see that this bill has had full support from the government during its passage through Parliament. After all, this is a wholly sensible bill and brings lasting power of attorney into the 21st century. In fact, this builds on some really sensible recommendations that the Office of the Public Guardian and Ministry of Justice identified in their recent work on modernising LPAs. On this, I recently heard from a constituent of mine, Tim, who works as a volunteer for a charity, the Paperweight Trust, which provides free services to those needing guidance on legal, financial and welfare issues. Tim is an expert on this issue, so I was really interested to hear his observation that, as it stands, the Office of Public Guardian is in fact taking much longer to process LPAs. And based on his experience, he told me that for so many people, the complexity and accessibility are a constant worry when it comes to this kind of documentation. And to this end, I wanted to make some observations. So firstly, how will this bill seek to address the problems that Tim has highlighted? Will it make a difference? Well, this bill will deliver two important changes to legislation around powers of attorney, and I think really add to the work on the back of this report led by the Ministry of Justice. First, it will reform the process of making and registering a lasting power of attorney to make it safer, easier and more sustainable. Here it will bolster safeguards and explicitly permit a third party to object to the registration of a lasting power of attorney, which I think is a really important protection. Moreover, it will modernise the process of filling in a lasting power of attorney, a move which, in my view, is very long overdue. Secondly, it will widen the group of people who can provide certified copies of powers of attorney to include chartered legal executives. From my point of view, I think this is most welcome and works to correct a historic omission, which means that chartered legal executives can certify alongside solicitors, which I hope will mean that we can speed up the process, because there will be more professionals involved in the process. So I would say to the honourable member who's bringing through the bill that these reforms are most welcome. And of course, digitalisation offers the opportunity to create a more efficient service for creating powers of attorney. However, Mr Deputy Speaker, this process needs to put protecting older and vulnerable individuals at its heart. So to this end, I would like just to press the need that any digital system places a premium on accessibility. And I hope that we may hear from the Minister on this point. Of course.
To my honourable friend for giving way. We've all talked so far in this debate about how we're going to be moving to a far more digital system. Unfortunately, the public sector record, in fairness equally the private sector record in delivering IT systems, has not always been as stellar as we may want. And having been on the Public Accounts Committee for 2 years, I can certainly attest to that being the case. So, as my honourable friend join with me in looking forward to the Minister's comments to see where we are actually in the process of developing this digital system, which, according to the explanatory notes, is only going to cost £3 million, which is a relatively small figure. So I hope that that's all on track, but does she agree that's very important?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and he's absolutely right to highlight what he has regarding the digitalisation of the whole process. And I think we all know that governments, no matter what their political persuasion, don't always have the greatest record in improving digitalisation of this kind. So I would really look forward to hearing from the Minister on this point. And as an able Minister, as we all know, I am sure he is already ahead of the game and knows exactly what he's doing to improve the digitalisation, the speed, and keeping it within budget. So, going back to the points I was making, Mr Deputy Speaker, the premium on accessibility will be absolutely key for people who are not too familiar with the internet, and considering that 25% of the over 65s do not use the internet, that's much of a point we have to make, though I do think that as we get older we are more used to using the internet. So a woman in my 50s like I am,
never.
Very, very used to using the internet now. I thank my honourable friends for their kind comments. Likewise, any approach to a multi-channel system needs to work just as efficiently as the digital option.
Just on that point, my great friend is making a valuable contribution, as she always does. But does she share my concerns that if people are not necessarily technology advanced and seeking support in getting their application through, there is relevant safeguards in place to ensure that they're not being manipulated as they would have not necessarily been if it was just purely paper?
I think my honourable friend for South West Hertfordshire makes an absolute key point on this, and it may be that the Ministry of Justice may want to look at what public sector organisations like libraries, local authorities may be able to do to help in supporting possibly older people or those who are not au fait with using the internet, more vulnerable people. So that may be something for the Minister to consider eventually as this takes place. But I would say that I do welcome this bill and what it sets out to achieve. It is tough and often heartbreaking when loved ones lose the ability to make their own decisions as a result of mental incapacity. And as such, a lasting power of attorney is one of the most important legal documents a person will make. So we need to get the legislation right. And if I may, Mr Deputy Speaker, take this opportunity to provide my own experience with lasting power of attorney. I became a power of attorney for my father, and I am also the lasting power of attorney for my mother. But I did this back 6 years ago when it became very, very obvious that my father had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he was not going to be in have the mental capacity to be able to make the decisions for himself as the condition progressed. So at the point of when he still had the capacity, we organised lasting power of attorneys on health and on the financial side. And I think it's really, really important to make the point that lasting power of attorneys are so important on both areas. Yes, the financial side, but also health.
On that point. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'm very interested to hear the Honourable Lady's experience with this process. Would she agree with me that actually, having been through the process, it is needlessly complicated?
I thank my honourable friend for his comments. And yes, I mean, we went through a solicitor, and you know, our family solicitor, and somebody that we trust, and also somebody who knew us and knew the family. But I think that you're absolutely right. The honourable members are absolutely right in the fact that, you know, it can be long. It can be, if you're not using a solicitor, then it can be quite unnerving for some people, because it's such a massive, important document. But I have to say to the House that from my own personal experience, when it came to the end of my father's life, and there had to be major decisions made on whether to continue his treatment, the fact that I had the final say, I think, ensured that the family knew that we were making the decision for my father in his best interest, and it wasn't left to professional. And you know, I would absolutely trust a doctor or a medical professional to make that decision, but having the health power of attorney meant that I made the decision on his behalf.
My honourable friend, once again, he's continued to amaze me with her quality of speaking and the points she's making. Does she agree with me, though, that actually the fact we are discussing what some families may regard as a taboo subject in this great chamber will hopefully give families up and down the country the confidence to actually start those conversations, that when and if they need the power of attorney, those difficult decisions and discussions have already been made well in advance of that.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and again, he's absolutely right. And again, I would say to people in this house, but across the country, have the conversations now. I am going to have the conversation, having looked at this bill and having written the speech, that I'm going to have the conversation with my husband, because we never know, Mr Deputy Speaker, what is around the corner. And I want to make sure that if anything happened to me, that my husband has the lasting power of attorney so he can make the decisions both financially and for my health benefits and vice versa. And that's what I learned through this process with my father, that when he sadly died last May, that actually, because I had the lasting power of attorney for the financial side, it made it such an easier transition that I could help my mother with all the finances. She'd never had to do any financial planning or any financial management in the household. It was always down to my dad. So the fact is, I could then work with the insurance companies, the banks, the pension providers, and it was a fairly seamless transaction and transition. And I would go back to what's in the bill is on the digitalisation side. I think what's happened, one of the positives from the pandemic was because I had the death certificate, and many pension providers and insurance companies now will accept the death certificate via email. So you don't have to keep posting and having so many different copies of the death certificate. So I hope that with the digitalisation of the lasting power of attorney, that will have maybe a similar success in making it easier for the transition when you have to provide information to whoever is you're dealing with on behalf of your loved one. Of course.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. And I was very struck by her speech and the reference to her father, and I'm very sorry about that situation. We had a similar experience in my own family with my mother-in-law who had Alzheimer's, and obviously my wife and her siblings had a lasting power of attorney, and indeed she lived for many years with Alzheimer's, so it was all the more important. And I think that one of the key points in this is that actually the speed with which the lasting power of attorney is granted is incredibly important, because sometimes people's condition can deteriorate very quickly, and therefore would the Honourable Lady agree with me that this bill is vitally important for looking at ways in which we can speed the process up, which is after all the key point of digitisation.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I agree with him 100% that when we know that there are conditions like Alzheimer's, dementia, we know that they can be slow, but there can also be rapid progress of the condition. So I do think that it's very important that we make the process as quick as possible, so that it gives the person at the heart of the decision making the reassurance that they know that their family will do everything in their best interest. And it also gives the family the reassurance that they have got the power now to make sure that their loved one is as comfortable as possible in their last years. Of course, yes.
Grateful, my humble friends being very generous with their interventions. Having the conversation about a lasting power of attorney is very important. Would she also agree it's also important that more people have the conversation about producing a will, so they've also got their financial affairs in good order, and it's something I have on my to-do list every year, and I'm going to do it very soon, but I haven't got around to it, so I encourage others to do as I say and not as I do.
I absolutely absolutely agree with my honourable friend with his intervention. It is an absolute truth that we never know what fate has in store for us. And I would urge him to put the making the will and the lasting power of attorney at the top of his list. And I promise you, I promise him, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will do the same. And I would just take this opportunity to urge everyone across the country to discuss with those closest to them whether they should arrange a lasting power of attorney for each other.
On that point.
Of course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Lady is making a very important point that everybody should be having these conversations, but not everybody follows up on them because of the expense, for example, of getting legal advice to sort a will, a power of attorney. And I know the Honourable Lady mentioned using a solicitor herself and was fortunate to be able to do that. For some people, that will simply be too expensive. Does she agree with me that the measures in this bill will make it much easier for people to access lasting powers of attorney without incurring that extra expense and difficulty?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention, and I agree again with him wholeheartedly, and that's why one of the reasons why I'm supporting this bill from the member for South Basildon and East Thurrock, because I think it will do that. I think it will give the reassurance that we all need as human beings, that we know that at the end of life, or when things go wrong and we may end up in hospital without the capacity to make a decision on ongoing treatments, but also, you know, every amount of our lives these days is done digitally, whether it's online banking, whether it's insurance, and if our partner or a member of our family or a close associate has the ability to be able to go into our bank accounts to ensure that if we are incapacitated for whatever reason, that they can be then, our financial affairs can be looked after and life can go on for our families.
Honourable friend, give way. Thank you, and I am very grateful to my honourable friend for her support of my bill, but also being so eloquent in her explanation of some of the effects of this. One of which, and she had just moved on to the digital aspect of this, is to create a digital record of lasting powers of attorney. If you like, a digital truth, which is going to be accessible by those who want to check lasting powers of attorney. They are powerful documents, but there may come a point where you wish to take back that power as the donor from one of your attorneys and give it to someone else. At the moment, that would exist as a paper form. In the future, there will be a digital version which will be bang up to date, and that, I think, is a very important safeguard.
I absolutely agree with the honourable member who is responsible for this bill, because everything that we can do with this bill has got to improve the situation for those at the heart of the lasting power of attorney, but also those who are caring for them. But of course, life changes. You may be incapacitated from a health point of view, but then you may hopefully recover. And therefore you can take back that power. So it is so important to have the flexibility and the protection going forward. So I absolutely agree with him. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will obviously now conclude, because I think I have been speaking for long enough and I could speak so much longer on this subject, but I won't, because I know that there are other members who want to support the bill too. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe this bill does get it right. I support it, and I hope to see it become law shortly.
Modernise.